when Zach first started doing it, I was like, what are you going to talk about? You put one foot in front of the other and you go up the mountain, There's nothing to talk about, really. But, it turns out there is.
Welcome to the Greens and Blues 14er podcast. This episode, Zach learns why he has such an affinity for car camping. I vow to stop bringing cheese to the summit. Zach's dad ensures that we gotta get to the tundra. And then he sits down with us and shares a whole bunch of stories from his experience in the mountains. So Zach, Father's Day is just around the corner, and we're going to be talking with a father.
That's right, Eric. Today we're going to have as a special guest my dad.
That's awesome.
So my dad is the person who introduced me to hiking. He's the one that maybe took me or dragged me, I don't know what verb we want to use, on most of my early hikes as a child and even as an early adult. He's kind of the inspiration for my hiking, and he's a formidable hiker of his own right. I don't know what his count is up to. I think at one point we tried to sit down and figure it out, Dad, and it's close to
14ers,
close to 40 14ers and
40,
maybe
43, I think.
43 14ers and maybe 10 to 20 other 13ers thrown in there for good measure, and innumerable hikes. And as we might hear in a minute, plenty of failed hikes as well. So, so welcome to the Greens and Blues podcast, Dad.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. I feel like an honored guest. I don't know how much I deserve to be honored, but
this is all about dads and our experiences.
Okay.
We're going to ask you some questions. Maybe this will be like therapy. We'll get to talk it out today.
You got some issues you need to talk about.
I waited to get you onto a podcast that other people will listen to
Oh man,
get it out.
That's not fair.
Yeah, can't run now, Dad. So we'll hear about your origin story here, Dad, as a hiker, because I think it's interesting. And for
Really?
those of you listening, my dad is just a tick into his 70s and is still going. Just today,
Wow.
heaved a canoe on top of a car. So
I'm not that old. Jesus. Make it sound like it was a feat.
All right. So Eric, I think you have our first question today.
Yeah. So Zach has mentioned before the influence you have, obviously, as his father, but also the significant influence that you've had on him in his hiking beginnings and from there. So I'm curious, Gary, what your memories are of kind of the initial hikes you went on with Zach. What kind of drove you to get him into hiking, or at least introduce him to it, and kind of some of the first memories you have of that?
Yeah. Well, for better or worse, you kind of bring up your kids with your own vision.
Hmm.
And I always wanted to expose him to nature because that's really important to me as a biologist by training, not by profession, but by training. And I want him to be exposed to nature, and I want him to be connected to it because I feel like it's really important, not just for recreation, certainly is a little bit of it, but mostly for his own inner peace. I think it's really important to be in touch with the natural world. So I wanted to expose him to that. I encouraged him to do so. I forced him to do so on some occasions. But mostly it was congenial, and he was agreeable, especially when he was younger, when he didn't know that he could say no. But I took him on, short hikes, his mother and I. And we went backpacking at a very young age. I can't remember, what was it, like 5 or something, like a 4 or 5.
He's mentioned I think even younger than that is what I got the impression of.
Yeah, maybe is.
Would our first trip have been to the San Pedro parks?
No, I think your mom and I took you up to Santa Fe Baldy Trail once and spent the night towards Santa Fe Baldy.
Mm-hmm.
You were like 3, 2, something like that.
That's
And of
impressive.
course, we went car camping a lot when he was really young. I mean, like a few months old. We took him to California, went to national parks and stuff. So he's always been exposed to nature. And as he got older, I tried to expose him more to the more strenuous parts of my life, the hiking part. And he took to it for the most part. He went through a period of he was indifferent, but once the testosterone kicked in, he was all on. He's on board, so that was good.
How did you come by hiking, Dad?
Well, that's interesting.
Where'd you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Texas, Fort Worth, Texas, not known for its natural features. I don't know. My dad was always, he was a farm kid, so he was always exposing me to the natural state of the world as best you can in Texas, I guess, North Texas. I didn't really get into it until I joined Boy Scouts, which 50 years, well, I guess that was 60 years ago, a long time ago, was quite the thing. And we went hiking a lot and just playing in the woods and went backpacking to New Mexico. We'd go backpacking at a scout ranch called Philmont.
I think that's a seminal first hiking experience for a lot of kids is going to Philmont Scout Ranch
Right.
Mm.
in northern New Mexico.
Yeah, when I just how old I am, they were just donated this ranch by Wade Phillips, who owned Phillips 66, right? They named it Philmont after Phillips, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And it's pretty big. I think it's like 80,000
That
acres.
the way you've always told that story to me, that was eye-opening for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was eye-opening because I'd never been exposed to like wilderness, just, you know, parklands, which is not really wilderness. And wilderness was quite fascinating to me, and I was quite enthralled by it because it really was wild. And to me, it just meant a lot. I don't know why, but it just did, always has. I want to see nature in its wild state, in its pure state, I guess, as pure as it can get nowadays. And so, yeah, that was eye-opening. Right. And it also exposed me to the effects of altitude and how tiring it is
Mm-hmm.
to hike with a pack over a mountain. So yeah, it was a good experience for me and the other kids, I'm sure. And after that, I went to Canada and Minnesota. I went canoeing. Another big trip we took, which is further eye-opening as to the level of exhaustion you can endure. Yeah, that's how I got exposed to it. And later on, after I graduated college, undergrad, moved to New Mexico, and we lived in the mountains before Zach was born.
Mhm.
We lived in the Jemez Mountains and hiked a lot. My goal wasn't to hike peaks. That was really never only, it was only a secondary goal. My main goal was to be out in the wild and enjoy nature. And really, that's all there was to it.
When did you start hiking peaks, Dad? What was your first 14er?
Oh, it's Handy's Peak. I
Oh,
think it
wow.
was
Mm.
81. And I went up Handy's Peak. That was so much fun for me. It was so beautiful. You know, had been in the alpine areas before in New Mexico, but Colorado was a whole nother expanse. There's just a huge expanse of alpine tundra, and I just loved it. And after that, I wanted to go a lot to hike up high, not necessarily to go to a peak, but eventually it kind of becomes a goal because as you're climbing these things, you think, well, I at least got to get to the top of this thing. I killed myself where I'm at, So yeah,
I remember as a kid, the mantra was always, we got to get to the tundra, son. We got to get to
yeah, we got to. I forgot about that.
that
Yeah,
was always like
I loved the tundra.
we got to
Yeah,
get up high and see things and
yeah,
we got to feel that
and the view,
expanse.
the view from up high, and all the little tiny flowers, and yeah,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
really nice up there. So
That's awesome. Wait, I'm glad you mentioned Handy's was your first one because I think, Zach, correct me if I'm wrong. I think you've mentioned, Zach, that you are considering taking your daughter up handies this summer for her first 14ers. So that's kind of a cool full circle thing if that's how it goes.
Yeah, Handy's is becoming a family mount. That was my 100th peak as well. So, and you were there for that, Eric.
I remember that.
Not that we need to tell a lot of war stories today, but what was that like hiking? You kind of know, you have that perspective, Dad, of hiking in the 80s, 90s, aughts, 2010s
Oh, it
now.
was so much more fun back then. I hate
So
to disappoint you guys.
what was more fun about it? Like I've heard you
Well,
say stuff
one
like
thing,
that.
you're all by yourself. Well, usually you're by yourself or, with your companions.
Mm.
A lot of times I was by myself because of situations, and there were no trails or very few trails, only on the really trafficked peaks like Longs or Grays, Torreys, Sherman maybe, were there trails. I mean, you didn't have the electronic techno stuff that you have now. You pretty much were on your own. If you were smart, you had a topo and you could read a topo. You could find yourself on a topo. You could use a compass. And you had to plan your routes. Usually, if you're smart, you did it before you went, not when you got there.
You're describing Zach to a T right now. This
Oh,
is
was
this is
he?
perfect.
I taught him well.
You did. That's you
Yeah,
sure
you
did.
need to, the worst thing is to get to the mountain and realize, oh, I'm coming from the wrong aspect. I should be on the
Mm-hmm.
south side. I'm on the
Oh
north
yeah.
side. What am I going to
Yeah.
do?
Yeah.
And that's it. I'm scratching. But not that being said, I have hiked peaks or a peak once, and I hiked the wrong peak. I ended up on the wrong peak. I don't know what peak I was on, but it wasn't the peak I meant to be on. And I got to the top before I realized, yeah, I hiked, oh, there's one over there that's even higher. What is that thing? And you look at your map and go, oh, geez, I hiked the
That
wrong mountain.
that happened to Eric and I on
Pretty
French Peak. We
embarrassing.
got up to the top of something and we thought, oh, we're on French, and then we look over and we're like, oh, that's another whole ridge over there.
I'm a drainage away.
I'm a drainage away. Dang it.
Yeah.
So, do you have any great stories of hiking early on? Like, oh, well, I've heard you say some of these. Okay, what was Mount Bierstadt like when you hiked it?
Oh, Bierstadt was horrible. It was the willows. The willows were just
Yeah.
awful. I
Yeah.
mean, it was like fighting your way through a swamp or something. The willows, they tangled your feet, it tore at you. I mean, it was just tough to get through the willows. Now it's a cakewalk. Somebody's cut them all, cut a path there.
Yeah, they've cut board. It's a boardwalk.
It's a
It's a whole
boardwalk, yeah.
boardwalk. That's
And
a
in fact, I came
spoiled now.
back. I hiked Bierstadt first through the willows and just hated the willows. And then, so I decided, well, I'm going to hike it again, but this time I'm going to go in winter when those stupid willows are under the snow. And I went back with Colleen and we skied it to the rocks, I guess you'd call it. And then we hiked up it. And that was in the winter. That was a lot more fun, although it was kind of scary because on the way back we had little avalanche issues.
Oh.
But and of course we did this on, like the shortest day of the year or something. It was like December 18th or something. And so we started out in the dark and we got back in the way darks.
Oh wow.
Yeah, like we couldn't hardly find the car kind of thing.
Oh wow.
But we made it. There were some other people there and they were nice enough to stay in their car until we got down.
Just aim for the headlights.
Well, yeah, they'd
Yeah.
flash their headlights every once in a while. We go, oh, yeah, that's it over there. Yeah. So we'd head over there. But yeah, that was fun.
Do we have any other fun stories of
Oh, if
back in the day?
anybody's hiked in the mountains a lot has a lightning story or two to tell, and sparks fly off your fingertips and your hair stands on end, and it's very scary.
Where did that happen to you, Dad?
Several times. Blanca, Calubra twice.
You've told me a story where you like huddled under a rock and
That was in Calubra.
and you had ground lightning and literally sparks came out of your fingernails.
Yeah, sparks were flying off my fingers.
Oh
I
my
crawled
gosh.
it was above the timber line, so I crawled under an outcrop and there was a crack in it, and I crawled in there with a pika. Pika was startled, but I crawled up in there. I couldn't get my whole body in, just my upper torso. My legs were sticking out, and the lightning would hit and just scatter like you know, I don't know how to explain it. It was like ground lightning, I guess is what you call it. It was scary. I
Wow.
thought I was going to meet my maker on that one, but I got down.
Oh my gosh.
But when the sparks come off your fingertips, that gets your attention, or it
I,
should
I would
get your
imagine.
attention.
Got the pike's attention, I'm guessing too.
Yeah, well, the
Holy cow.
pika, you know, had more sense than I did. He was already under there,
He
like,
was grounded.
Yeah.
no big deal to him. Probably sees it every day, you know. But, yeah.
So, what memories do you have of hiking with me early on? Okay, what was the first 14er I did? Tell me what it was like from a dad's eye perspective.
Oh, okay. We went to the Creststones, I think because Colleen's parents lived in Canyon City, and it was easy drive there in the morning. And we decided we're going to hike 14er. Now that of those four in the group, the easiest one is
Humboldt.
Humboldt.
Humble.
Yeah, right. So we're saying, well, we're going to take Zach up Humboldt, and we kind of crossed our fingers, knowing that we probably would have to turn around before we got to the top because he would revolt, you know, because it's pretty hard to cajole a kid up a 14er.
I was what, 10, 11?
No, you were 7 or 8, Zach.
Oh
Okay.
wow.
Yeah, you were young. Colleen had the biggest role because you liked Colleen.
So this was my stepmom.
Is her stepmom, and Zach liked her a lot, and he wouldn't tell her probably no, right? Tell me no in a heartbeat, and throw it, you know, like I'm not moving. And I guess I was a part of it.
So
Cajole, we kept telling you it was just a little bit further, even though it was a long way
You
to
kept
go.
kept saying it, yeah.
Yeah, like, oh, it's
A
just
few more
over this,
feet. Yeah,
just
just over this hill.
You can see it. It's
Yeah,
right
that's
there,
right.
Zach.
Uh,
And we get up there and go, oh, look, it's just a little further. You know, the false summit thing.
the kids
Yeah.
these days call that gaslighting, Dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, gaslighting. Yeah, gaslighting. Lied. Anyway, we got him up to the top, and he was happy. And then we came down, and the down part was pretty easy for him.
Oh, I
Mm.
remember being really happy coming down.
Yeah,
And I remember two things
accomplished that
from that
yeah.
trip. I remember the drive in and out of that on
Yes.
that terrible
Terrible road.
Yeah, that road's
Connie.
rough.
Yeah.
I know it's worse now than it used to be, but even back then it was terrible. You could walk it as fast as you could drive it.
Mm.
Probably in a company vehicle, otherwise I would have never driven it.
Nothing better than a company truck, right?
Yeah, company trucks are the best.
Well, Gary, you mentioned Handy's was your first 14er. Do you have a favorite 14er that you have like especially fond memories of?
You know, I thought for me, Longs Peak was a lot of fun, even though it was, you know, a couple hundred people up there with you. The routes are just really intriguing, and they're really fun. You know, if you're in good shape and feeling well that day. It's a long hike, but it's a lot of fun. I liked Longs. I liked them all. Some of them, like the Swatch, has a lot of scree
Yeah,
and
it
talus,
does.
a
Yes, it
lot,
does.
and that gets tiresome.
Yes, it does.
But and the San Juans are more
Chaucy sometimes. And
yeah, they got soil, you know, and
Mm.
it's a lot more fun to walk on. And the rocks are, I don't know, somehow they don't feel as brittle or something. I don't know, but the San Juans, anything in the San Juans is fun.
what's your favorite hike that you did with me, Dad? That we did
Ooh.
together?
You know, Sniffles was fun, I thought.
Yeah.
Mm.
Sniffles was fun. You know, and I had a lot of fun on a hike that we didn't get to the point we wanted to get to. That was when we went up Kit Carson.
Zach's talked about that, how
Yeah,
And
you
we
were
ended
at
up
the
going
summit.
to
We went to Challenger Point.
Challenger
You went to
Point.
Challenger
We didn't
and
know
looked
it was
over.
We knew it was Challenger Point. We didn't know it was like a 14.
Well, it wasn't a 14er when we did it.
Yeah.
They named it.
yeah.
They
Yeah.
made it one
And we
later.
got there and
Yeah.
we decided, you know, it's too dangerous to go further because we didn't have our ice axes. And
It was late September when we did it.
was it? I thought it was
Yeah.
October.
I remember walking on that ridge,
It was really icy.
making our way towards Kit Carson, and it had like just a nice glaze of ice
Yeah, it
all
was
the way across
too
it.
icy to
Yeah.
continue. And so we turned around just short. But yeah, that was a smart decision. But I had a lot of fun on that hike.
I loved that hike. That was great. And we were so tired that night, we basically camped on the side of the road.
Yeah.
I remember waking up and cars passing right next to our tent. We
Yeah.
we could care less. Yeah.
Yeah. The Sangre de Cristos, you start out in this freaking sagebrush and they got all those hanging valleys and they're tiresome to hike.
Yeah.
It's
That was a
very
long
hard.
day.
It's a hard hike. Those are hard hikes. Blanca is really long. Seems like it takes forever to get up there. I
Mhm.
could see why people backpack up to the lake to do
Yeah.
it. But yeah, that was fun. I don't know. We just had a lot of fun hiking. I mean, San Pedro Parks was fun to hike. That's a wilderness area in the Jemez Mountains of New Mexico. Just had fun hiking those, really.
We used to
You
go hike
would
up
see a lot
there.
of wildlife. That's another thing
Yeah.
Mm.
I like to do is look for wildlife. And unfortunately, in the high tundra is not the place to look for wildlife,
Maybe
but
maybe a
maybe on the
ptarmigan.
approach you might see some. But
Yeah, we used to go hiking in the San Pedro parks in New Mexico, and we would go in October
mhm.
to listen to elk bugle.
Mm. Yeah.
And again, I have like snippets of memories. One of the memories that I have of well, we did that I think 3 or 4 times was mountain lion screamed next to
Yes.
our tent one night.
Oh gosh.
And it
And
really sounds like a woman screaming, doesn't it?
yeah, it was terrifying.
I thought, what's happening to that lady?
And then the other memory I have is we would go backpacking, but I couldn't carry much.
Yeah.
And so I just remember I couldn't even, when you were ahead of me hiking, I couldn't even see your head. Your pack was so vertical.
Well, yeah, you got to carry everything, like two
You're
sleeping
like,
bags, tent, the food, the whole nine
you
yards.
were like 7 feet tall with your pack. And I remember just seeing you bouncing along the trail with all this stuff on your back.
Yeah. Well, when you're a father, that's what you have to do.
Just say that's love right
He
there.
was like 5, so
5 or 6.
yeah,
Mhm.
and so he had a jacket in his pack and a little tiny water
And
bottle.
some socks, I think.
Yeah, and a hat maybe.
A four
And
pound
you got to
pack and
carry everything else.
yeah.
But it's worth it. And it wasn't a long hike, let's be fair. It's San Pedro Park, so is this high plateau with its meadows. It's full of just gigantic meadows. That's why they call it the parks, with ridges, short ridges of trees in between. And it's really pretty, really nice.
It's beautiful.
Beautiful country. A lot of elk up there in the fall. And we went up the first backpack we did, or maybe the second. We went up on a full moon. So not only were the elk bugling all night, but there was a pack of coyotes across the
Yeah.
park and the mountain lion thing. And I thought, man, my son is going to be petrified. The coyotes are literally 200 yards away, and this mountain lion out there somewhere, and the elk are bugling and they're stomping around your camp. But he was
you
fine.
could hear their footfall.
Yeah, you could hear him like stomping around. But he was fine. I was shocked. I can't believe he wasn't scared.
I was gonna ask Zach, you remember that and you weren't petrified? You were all right with it?
No, I think, one of the things perhaps about hiking with your dad is that I was never scared. I thought my dad was a wild man, but I always felt safe. And
If only he knew.
yeah, now I've heard all the stories of, freezing your butt off and doing making mistakes and this and that. But I did at the
Yeah.
time I just thought, oh, this guy he knows what he's doing. This is
Well, I did kind of.
yeah, you did. Do you have any regrets as a dad of like things that you wish you had done more or differently or less with me?
Yeah, I got plenty of regrets, but none with you, really.
Not with hiking either, eh?
No, I wish we could have done more of it.
Yeah.
But life
Mm.
is a series of compromises. You can't just do that all the time. No, I can't think of any regrets. I wish we could have hiked Long's Peak together,
Mm.
but we didn't get to do that. No, no regrets.
Well, it sounds like you did have at least some good memories and a lot of good experiences together. And look at the son that you've raised and what he's able to do on the mountain. He's able to
Yeah,
do everything you
yeah,
talked
he
about.
makes me proud. He's really in good shape.
Oh yeah.
And he hikes long ways, and he doesn't seem to be afraid of much of anything, which you shouldn't be afraid in the wild. I mean, it's especially in the settled wild like Colorado is. I mean, there's mountain lions, but there's not grizzly bears out there trying to eat you. And really, there's not much to be afraid of, to tell you the truth.
Only my own folly.
Only your own folly. You
Yeah.
know, like
That's a
you
good
try to
point.
do too much, or
Mhm.
you take a route that's, stupid, and you end up hurting yourself.
Mm.
And usually that's what gets people is their ego gets in the way of whatever they're doing. And that's one thing I try to teach Zach is don't let your ego get the best of you. You got to have a certain amount of ego, but don't let it put you in a position where, you're done for. And nature's got a good way of, and hiking has a good way of teaching you,
Mm.
suppressing your ego, because
Mhm.
it'll teach you some lessons
Oh
if your
yeah.
ego gets ahead of you. I don't know how many times I've about frozen to death because I thought I was superhuman, Yeah. And back in the day, now that I'm old, I can say that. When I first started hiking, everything was cotton or wool. We didn't have, you know,
Synthetic materials.
synthetic
Polyester.
materials. We didn't have
Yeah.
Gore-Tex.
Mm-hmm.
You were cold a lot and wet, and
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it makes a big difference.
let's do
Yeah.
a 1981 gear rundown here. So like,
Well, 81 is more in the 60s, I'm thinking.
okay, when you were a kid,
Yeah, my first backpack frame was wooden, and it was a killer, and then just cotton straps. I mean, it was tough on a kid.
what
Wow.
was your tent made of?
Canvas, no floor.
Canvas soaked in oil, right? Is that what it
Well,
was?
yeah, it was weatherized.
Weatherized canvas.
Yeah,
Mm.
it wasn't real heavy canvas, like, lighter the better. But it's basically a World War II pup tent, is what it was
Mm.
like.
Mm-hmm.
No floor, minimal cover. When it rained, it leaked somewhere,
Oh yeah. Yep.
for sure.
Did you dig a trench around your?
Yeah, you had to dig a trench. We sometimes, when they came out with plastic ground cloths, we thought that was great. Like, man, look at this. We don't have to sleep on the ground.
Directly on the ground. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I first started camping, we put newspapers down.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
That was what,
Real
like the
insulation.
bums do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was your first pair of hiking boots?
My first pair were just work boots, really. But my first real hiking boots were those giant leather boots that weighed like 12 pounds. What were they? I don't remember the name of them. They were Italian, very, very heavy. You'll see them on old pictures of mountaineers. It's super heavy and not the thing to hike with, unless you're climbing,
Mont
Mount
Blanc.
Everest or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I hated those things. I mean, I loved them because they were really cool looking, but no, not very practical. So turns out you can hike them in like really light shoes. You don't need those heavy boots. So now my boots are, what do they weigh? 3 pounds, 2 pounds, something like
Yeah.
that.
What do you think hiking has given you? Maybe as a dad, but also just as a human. I think you kind of started to go down that road a minute ago, but what is the gift that hiking has given you?
Well, it gives you lots of gifts. I think it keeps you centered. It teaches you what's important in the world. It boils everything down to the basics, when you're out there. It's not about this or that at your job or anything like that. It's more about, I guess the important things become clear hiking in the wilderness. Get you down to the basics. And for me, it's always centered me. And it's just really important to me. I wanted to be important to Zach.
Hmm.
Some people were fine without it. Most parents try to expose their kids to a multitude of things positive that the parents think are positive and would like to see them embrace something out of that multitude of things you expose them to. And
Mm.
you just hope when they grow up, one of those things will stick, whether it be art or music or, being close to nature or, respecting wildlife. And, you just hope it'll stick. And it's once they're adults, the game's over. You don't have much influence whatsoever. And I was glad the natural thing and the hiking thing stuck with Zach.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Sure.
I was really happy with that. There was this time there where I thought, no, may not happen. but it did.
Teenage years can be rough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The rebellious phase, like, I'm not doing that. It wasn't a terrible rebellion. I mean, as you guys know, as your kids, I don't know how old your kids are, but once they hit teenagers, you just kind of back off and try to keep them from falling in the ditch on either side of the road, It's really not much guidance going on. Just just pray a lot and hope they don't make complete fools of themselves. I'm sure my father thought the same thing. I probably disappointed him a lot. It's okay. That's what happens.
Well, Dad, we have prepared some rapid fire questions for you here.
What?
So these are quick. So
Oh
you
no.
gotta be snappy here, Dad.
Nappy.
We're not timing it though. I'll
Yeah,
give you
we're
that
we're
though.
not. You're not
Can
on
you
the
edit
clock.
this?
So we're gonna ask you just whatever first comes to mind.
Okay.
You got to say it.
Just like a one-word response or
Well, and you can elaborate a little bit.
okay.
Okay. So first question: what's your least favorite 14er experience?
Oh, I'd have to say it took me 5 tries to climb Mount Massive.
Oh,
And that
wow.
was
Of all peaks.
well, it was always the weather, or I got up way late, started way late. It was and then the cascading of weather events after that.
Yep.
But yeah, it took 5 times, yeah. And so that was my least favorite mountain to go to because I had this feeling like I'm going to fail.
It's a Groundhog Day.
Yeah, it's Groundhog Day.
It's 8 a.m. and I'm not where I need to be yet.
Yeah.
Right.
And I always went to the
The Southwest Slopes route.
Southwest slope.
Yeah.
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 And then I tried the other side, I guess southeast slope. And that seems like a really long approach. Less steep, but really long. Anyway, that was the least favorite. Or I'm trying to think of one with a lot of scree and talus on it. Places in the Saguache. Shavano, strangely enough, was not fun for me because it had like multiple false summits.
Mm.
And maybe it was just me that day. But it seemed like we'd never get there. Colleen was with me and we just, man,
Just
it seemed
the
like it went on
horizon kept
forever. Yeah,
stretching
it's like it's always on the edge of the horizon. Finally, we got there. But, it was probably no big deal. It's probably just my mindset that day. Yeah, I can't think. They've all been great, really. I mean, even that day it wasn't bad. I mean, come on. So, yeah, we had an interesting experience coming off Shivano and Tabawash. You used to just climb straight up this. I don't know. They probably got a trail now, but you used to just climb straight up the slope. Just
Yeah, up the Angel of Shivano.
Yeah. Up at the
no,
Angel.
no. You start from the west.
Oh, okay.
And there's
okay.
you
Interesting.
get off the road and you switch back a little bit and then it's just like bomb it. Okay, just straight up this angle repose slope. That's how we did it. And we were by ourselves, as you mostly were back in those days on the 14ers. You didn't have crowds, and that was great. I don't think the last 14ers I've done, they were starting to be crowded. This is an aside. And they weren't near as enjoyable. But we were coming down and we interrupted some people that, were without clothing. And it was
I've
very
never heard this.
embarrassing. And
I've
it
never heard
was
this
really
story.
awkward. Yeah, it was really awkward because you're coming down and you're like plunge stepping, right? And then there was this little bench. And so you kind of like run into this bench because you've been plunge stepping. And all of a sudden, like, whoa, what are these people doing? They don't
I
have
didn't sign up for
what
this.
is going on, And like, oh, I'm sorry, it's like, oh,
Wild times.
yeah, we're just going down. So we just kept, and that was funny. And they were startled. I'm sure they thought they're the only people up there.
I'm reckoning that was
Yeah.
going through their
I'm
head.
gonna guess. Yep.
Yeah.
And we interrupted a intimate moment, but very awkward. And we had our dog with us, of course, and he was over there like,
give a quick sniff.
yeah. He wanted to meet him.
Well, on the other side, what would you say is your favorite 14er experience
Or hiking experience.
or
period.
hiking experience in general? Yeah.
Oh, well, I used to hike a lot as part of my job in Arizona. Nevada. That's all I did all day was I would hike all day and map these abandoned mines. And that was my most enjoyable thing I've ever done, I think. Because it was sometimes it was wilderness, but it was always wildlands, nobody, nowhere. I mean, not for 20, 30 miles. You're just out there. Just you would go on a four-wheel drive road as far as you could go, and then you would hike to these abandoned mines. And that was very enjoyable because I got to see a lot of the country, the Western US that way. And I got to see a lot of things I'd never get to see, a lot of wildlife I never would have seen. It's where I saw my mountain lions.
Javelina.
Javelina, you'd have to like peer into these adits and or tunnels, I guess most people would call them. And you're in bright sunlight, and it's pitch dark in there, and all of a sudden these javelina come running at you. They look like mastodons, and they're coming at you, man. Because you spooked them, and they're wanting out of there, and you're in the way. Got to jump. The guy I did it with, he had a mountain lion run between his legs.
Oh my gosh.
That he startled, and he didn't even see the mountain lion until it was between his legs, and that was pretty funny. And yeah, that kind of stuff. That was a lot of fun. But as far as 14ers go, I really think it's probably Long's Peak was my most fun one. Huron was a lot of fun.
Okay.
Yeah, I liked Huron. I hiked it twice. They're all pretty cool. Now I think about it.
All right. So another one. You are notorious in my world for having strong opinions about food you hike with. Why do you hate cheese as a hiking food so much?
I don't know if I hate it.
When I was a kid, you'd always be like, "Oh, those people are hiking with cheese."
Well, it's hard to digest, and I don't think it's a smart thing to have. But I like cheese.
I know you like cheese,
And
but
when I cross country ski, cheese is preferred meal. But at high altitudes, you want something, I think, my favorite food, sugary, because it's quick and easy to digest. And you don't want something that's lumping in your stomach.
yeah, I just remember us seeing
That's it. Yeah, I
we'd
was
see
always,
people and they'd be peeling off a hunk of cheese and be like, "God, those people are hiking with
yeah, they
cheese."
got the Gouda going. Yeah. Like, man, they should know better than that.
So how about a particular piece of gear that you would hike with that maybe is a little unusual, or maybe you've never met anyone else that carries this, but it's something that you really like to have with you?
Oh, there's probably something because I carry everything. Zach will tell you.
That's why
My
we put this question in here.
my starting pack weighs like 15 pounds. I mean, it's got everything in it that you could ever need because I always like to be prepared. The one time you don't take it, you need it. Something unusual. Well, for day hikes, what would it be? I know I always carried a little hatchet backpacking. I don't carry it on day hikes. And Zach always thought, what are you carrying that for? That's stupid. But yeah, I always carry that. I don't know.
I was just thinking of your pack in general, just
Yeah,
just your standard pack weight, you lugging that thing out of the car.
I have everything. First aid kit, pocket knife, pencil and paper, a mirror, compass, map. When I hiked, Jerry Roach didn't have a book. He's my age, he hadn't written books by when I was doing. We had the Bornemann and Lampert 14ers guide, and sometimes I just carry the whole book until I got smart and started making copies of it as I'm going. I guess that would be the guidebook. I do carry a lot of stuff, and I would hike with friends that wouldn't carry. They'd have a bottle of water
And a granola bar.
and a granola
Yeah.
bar, and they're in their like not their flip flops, but light tennis shoes or something. Like, man, how do you hike? Some people get away with it. I can't. I have to always carry rain gear and always carry a coat because I have been where I'm frozen, and I want a coat and I want my gloves and I want a wool hat. That's what I carry, and that's why my pack weighs 25 pounds everywhere.
Without water.
Without water.
Before
With
water,
no
yeah.
water.
No,
Yeah.
no water, no food.
Yeah. That's the starting weight. Yeah. I do carry a lot of stuff. Zach's always criticized me for that.
So we ask a question on our podcast quite a bit about songs. If you could have a soundtrack to your hiking life, who would write those songs?
Well, I'm going to
And
reveal my age.
and why would it be John Denver?
He knew the answer.
I knew it before I asked it.
Why would it be? I mean, obvious, he sang about Colorado and he sang about the mountains,
And he
And he had a
was
pleasant voice
and he was from your era, and
from my era. And he actually went to high school at a high school near me
Oh,
in
wow.
Fort Worth, Texas. He went to Arlington Heights High School. Hated it, but he went there.
and a lot like you,
Fled.
fell in love with
Yeah, fell
with
in
the
love
mountains.
with the mountains. Yeah. He had a lot of money and he could move to Aspen.
Can't all win.
Yeah, but to be fair, when he first went there, he was just a bum.
Do you have a favorite John Denver song?
Oh, the one about Colorado.
I guess he'd rather be in
Yeah,
Colorado.
I guess I'd rather be in Colorado. Yeah,
Mm.
that's it. Right. That's it.
That was your ringtone on my phone for years.
Really?
Yeah.
I had no idea. And the Song of Wyoming, I always liked that song. The Song of Wyoming that he sang. I just like that song.
Mm.
But yeah, I'd rather be in Colorado, which is true. That's my whole life. I'd rather be in Colorado.
Guiding philosophy.
A guiding principle. Although northern New Mexico is pretty close, but Colorado's feels like home.
Eric has our last rapid fire question here.
Uh-oh.
I'm looking forward to hearing your answer on this one, Gary. What is the worst four-wheel drive road you've ever been on?
Oh, wow.
I'm guessing you've had a few.
This is inspired by me
In
as a child.
Colorado?
Anyone,
Anywhere.
period.
It
But
could be
this
anywhere.
is inspired by me as a child, bouncing around in the back of a truck.
Not in the back. You always up front.
Most of the time up front. Occasionally, you let me ride in the back, and I
Yeah,
could just
true.
flop back.
Yeah, it's a good way to break a leg. Zach would always ride up, and back then pickups didn't have the super cab, it was just single cab. And when he was a little kid, he'd just stand up in the seat and he'd hit his head on the roof. He'd be bouncing so much. But I guess at one point we had a Land Cruiser, and that ride's really rough and stiff. Well, it would have been in New Mexico on the volcanic rocks on Mount Taylor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was the worst road I've ever been in my life. But I'm trying to think, when I was doing the abandoned mines thing, I went some pretty bad roads then, and almost tipped over a couple times. Got stuck many, many times.
Oh, yeah.
I got pretty good at getting unstuck by myself. In Colorado, probably that road up to towards the Creststones. What's the name of that?
Oh,
lake?
South Colony.
South Colony Lakes Road. Is it still open?
No, they closed it.
Well,
You
that's
have to
good.
you have to walk in.
Yeah, they should have closed. The worst road I've ever been on was the one that went up to the lake up by Mount Blanca.
When you said Blanca, I thought
Lake
of
Como
Lake
Road.
Como
Lake Como,
Road. That
yeah.
road is ridiculous.
It's ridiculous, and of course I was wanting to close it in the 90s, and
Really?
I was involved with Sarah Club then, and I wrote a long letter saying, yeah, they should close it because it's just unbelievably bad, and
Yeah.
nobody in their right mind would try it. But there's a group of people do these rock climbing things, which at the time I'd never heard
They've got
of.
those rock crawlers, yeah.
Rock crawlers.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a whole big club, and they got involved and they kept it open. But I'd never heard of rock crawlers. I didn't even know there was such a thing. But yeah, that's the worst road I ever attempted to drive. I couldn't drive it. It was stupid bad.
It's still stupid bad.
Still stupid bad.
It'd be hard pressed to take a bulldozer up that thing.
Yeah.
Oh, anything. I think when I had a Wrangler forever ago, and I think we got up to about 8,500-ish, and then we just had to hike the whole rest of it because it's just such a bad road.
You're gonna break something.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna break a tie rod, or you're broken down out in the middle of nowhere. Who's gonna come fix that?
Yeah. No one can even get to you.
Yeah, they can't. They gotta hike the parts in.
Yep.
Then you gotta figure out how to turn around.
Last question here, Dad. Since Eric and I are both dads and we're starting to get our kids into hiking more, Eric's a little further down this road than I am. If you could give us two dads advice about hiking, what would it be?
Just make it fun for them somehow through distraction or
Gaslighting.
gaslighting. Just make it fun, and make it enjoyable. Build up a bunch of hype before you go, about how great it is.
Just lie to them on
But
the
if
way and while you're there.
they want to do what their dads do, it's just human nature. So I think that's half the battle. They want to be with you and they want to like what you like. That's it. You just got to make it enjoyable enough that they realize that, hey, this is not fun. You don't want them to think that. You want to think, oh, this is fun. It's a little hard, but I can do it.
Yeah.
That's where you want them. Don't get too ambitious and try to do too much. Little steps. But frankly, when I hiked up Lindsay, there was only 3 of us. It was me, and then behind me was this guy, and he had this little stick figure behind him. It was a long way, and is that a dog? What is that? And it turns out he's his 4-year-old son.
Oh, wow.
And his 4-year-old son had hiked 30 something of these peaks of 14ers, and he was 4. And that kid walked it the whole way. Dad didn't carry him up Lindsay. That kid walked it, and they got up there, I was up on top, and and I was up there a while, and they came, and that kid was great. He was like, dude, I'm having fun. Look over here, and he was in great mood. And I was in shock. I was like, man, that kid is young. How old is that kid? He said 4, almost 5. I was like, wow, he's hiked 30 something. And by the time he's 6, he would have hiked them all. It's like, how do you get your kid to do that? And how do you have the time to do that?
Oh,
but
man.
yeah. I always wonder what happened to that
He's
kid.
either a great hiker or utterly burnt out
Or
and,
burned out.
hates
and
it.
lives in like Ohio.
I don't know, but yeah. But if he hiked them all by the time he was 6, he's still in that stage where everything's great,
Yeah.
Yeah, I always wonder what happened to that kid.
Maybe he's listening.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe so. And he was a good little hiker for 4. I mean, he was scrambling up those rocks
scampering up like a rabbit.
Yeah, like a little piker or something. He was doing good.
Wow.
Well, Dad, thank you so much for coming by and sharing your thoughts on dad hiking and some old stories. We'll hit you up probably at some other point for just like hiking in the golden times.
Comic relief.
No, I think it's really important that people hear about how it's evolved or maybe devolved, depending on how you want to talk about it. But what it used to be like I don't think people know about hiking right now, separated from comprehensive route descriptions, trails to the top, established trailheads.
And you don't need all that. You don't need any of that to make it enjoyable and fun. In fact, it's more enjoyable without all that stuff, frankly, to figure it out on your own. But it's happened and it's not going to unhappen. So
I think that's the allure of 13ers.
Yeah, and the 13ers are more in line with what it was like when I was, you're usually by yourself, no one within shouting distance.
And you got to figure it out
on the trail, and you got to figure it out yourself. And that goes a long way to build your confidence in your character. I look back on the old timers when I was starting out, and these guys are in their 50s, 60s, even 70s. I mean, one guy was almost 80. What was it like when they started?
Yeah.
Not much different than what we were doing actually in the 70s. I mean, you pretty much, you're in cotton clothing and your raincoat that's made out of plastic or something. Probably not much different than what we were doing, but it's evolved so differently. So much. Gore-Tex was a real revolution. In a good way. In a good way. Keeps you warm.
You haven't frozen in a while.
Yeah, you're not frozen to the bone, Yeah, it's I think you don't need all that.
Well, thank you, Dad.
I sound like an old rat.
Yeah, get off my lawn.
Get off my lawn, boy.
Well, thank you so much, Dad, for talking with us and sharing some stories. Hope this was enjoyable for you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Gary, this
Been
was a hoot.
great.
We really appreciate you spending some time with us and sharing your stories. This is awesome.
Thank you. It was enjoyable.
So, Zach, that was a lot of fun talking with your dad. What were your thoughts?
Oh man, he's my dad. So
He is.
there was some nuggets of Gary Gold in there. Um, I've heard a lot of those stories during my life, and I've heard a lot of that way of talking about hiking
Mm,
throughout my life. Hiking wasn't always just hiking with me and my dad. As you heard, hiking is also about spirit, and it's also about gratitude and about finding a place in the world. My dad always used to refer to mountains and nature as his church. He'd always say, son, other people have buildings they go to. I go to the mountains. And so if you hear me ask questions about, what's the meaning and the purpose behind hiking a lot, it's because I've been taught that hiking isn't just moving through wild spaces. It's also the movement of the soul. And yeah, I like hearing that from my dad, and my dad kind of condensed it down into 45-minute talk, which was fun.
mm,
What else do we say about our dads? There's this part of me that is him, and when I hear it out loud, I'm like, oh wow, that thing that I think is so intrinsically me is also intrinsically him.
for sure.
And is really cool. I don't get to talk to my dad like that very often, and I don't get to grill my dad like that very often. That was fun. What are your thoughts, Eric?
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Your dad's a hoot, and I think hearing his stories and just hearing how 14er passion has kind of evolved over the years, I'm sure that some of the things like the CFI and 14ers.com and things like that have helped to grow passion among hikers in Colorado and across the country, actually. But it was cool to hear your dad's thoughts on the evolution of what hiking 14ers was like decades ago compared to how it is now. It was kind of cool to hear that progression, and it was also really cool to hear some of the things that he said that I've heard you say before, where even just little phrases and little gems, like you said, the importance of the outdoors and how much it means to not just our bodies getting good exercise, but also our spirit, just being in nature and appreciating what's around us. But also, the example I'm thinking of is you had mentioned, I think during our gear episode about how baby wipes were a revolution. That's exactly the phrase you said. And then your dad came out and was like, "Eh, yeah, Gore-Tex, when that came out, that was a revolution." And I thought, I know where Zach got that from. I can pick that out right
That was
away.
life changing. I mean, when you think about so my dad was born in 1952. Sorry if you're hearing this, Dad, and I just outed your age, but my dad was born in 1952 in Waco, Texas, and he said it, but when they went hiking, they had wood frame packs with canvas.
Yeah.
It- They had canvas tents with a dirt floor.
Mm-hmm.
Probably looked a lot like camping 50 or 60 years previous. But then if you play that forward 40 years from my dad, I mean, you can hike now and get rained on and stay dry.
Oh yeah.
You can sleep in a downpour and not get wet. And my dad was saying they used newspaper for a pad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here we are. Oh man, my thermarest isn't thick enough. And my dad was sleeping on the Sunday funnies.
Right.
Yeah, that I think to have seen the level of change in terms of how much easier hiking is now in my dad's lifetime, it makes me want to talk to, for lack of a better word, some of these, kind of grizzled old vets that the things that they've seen, my dad can talk about, well, there was no trail. I just, you looked at a map and you studied it all week. A lot like the way Laura Clark talked about doing beta for her 13ers.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, that perspective, it's got to be weird for him to to see where it's at now.
Yeah.
There is, you can see there's a little bit of whist and maybe a little bit of, dang, I think he probably, if we were to pin him down, I think he feels like something got lost.
Hmm.
The experience of real adventure and, for lack of a better word, suffering
Mm-hmm.
that people used to have to do to get there. So
Yep. Yep.
I found it fitting that my dad's first peak was handies, my 100th peak was handies, and I plan on hopefully this summer taking my own daughter and making her first 14er handies. So
I think when that came through, a light turned on in my head, and I thought that is super cool. Like that's a very full circle moment there. As a family, you guys need to like build a shack at the summit of Handy. Is it just the Simpsons shack, and you guys all just hang out there every time you guys go up?
That's a very Simpson mountain too. That it's hard to get to.
Yeah.
And yeah, I found all that really interesting. I'd like to have my dad on again and get a little bit deeper into what some of his hikes were like, if you can recall that. But it was so fun to have him on and honor that for Father's Day.
For sure.
Well, Eric, what ways can people interact with the Greens and Blues podcast?
Well, if anyone has any thoughts, if anyone is a dad and wants to weigh in on Father's Day or give perspective on hiking with parents or kids, you can email us at greensandbluespodcast@gmail.com. You can reach out to us on our Facebook group. You can reach Zach's X account at NMHikerPerson. You can take a look at our videos or listen to our podcast on YouTube. And as of right now, that might be it.
Yeah, you can send a carrier pigeon to Norman, Oklahoma with
Mm.
$100 attached, and I'll make sure it gets to my house.
We keep forgetting that option. We got to remember that one.
We'll do our best.
Yeah, we will.
Well, thank you, Eric, for yet another enjoyable episode. And to all that celebrate out there, happy Father's Day.